Welcome to Unlikely Intersections, the podcast where intent, impact, and inquiry inspire our conversations. The fascinating thing about intersections is that we all go through many intersections daily. The way we navigate these determines the trajectory of our days and of our lives. I'm Dr. Philip Brown here with my good friend, Dr. Terry Jackson, and we've put together a compilation episode for you with two of Terry's favorite guests.
Yes, this is a real treat. We're talking about Dr. Tom Morris and Dr. Srikumar Rao. And the reason I put these together is because both men show philosophy and their practical application to everyday life. And we know it's going to be a real treat. Please watch it, comment, like, and share.
So we'll start with our guest, Tom Morris. Terry, I'm really excited today. We've got a wonderful guest. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about our guest, and then we'll turn it over.
Well, we have with us today none other than Mr. Gary Ridge, who is the recently retired CEO of WD-40. And if you know anything about Gary, if you've had the opportunity to read his book or to do any research on him, you understand that when it comes to employee engagement, his organization, WD-40, had some of the highest employee engagement scores for many, many years, that they exceeded actually the 90 percentile. That's how engaged. That's the type of culture that he was able to develop, or as he called it, the tribe. And with that, we're going to enjoy this conversation today. And of course, our topic is going to be around culture. So, Gary, it's a pleasure to have you.
G'day, good morning. It's great to be with you. Thank you so much for the invitation. Let me give you my preferred introduction, if I may.
Okay.
G'day, I'm Gary Ridge. I'm the recently retired, now refired, consciously incompetent, probably wrong, and roughly right, Chairman Emeritus of WD-40 Company and the Culture Coach.
Awesome. Love it. Love it, Gary. So give us a little bit of background around, your travels, your journey to becoming, I guess, CEO of, and when you begin to realize the importance of culture within an organization.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So I was with WD-40 Company for 35 years, 25 years as the CEO of a public company. So it's been a wonderful journey. I started with them in 1987 in Sydney, Australia, where I opened our Australian subsidiary. I transferred to the United States in 1994 to head up our international expansion program. We wanted to take the blue and yellow can with a little red top to the world because we knew there was lots of squeaks and rust out there that we could help people with. And then in 1997, the then CEO retired. And I was given the privilege and the opportunity to lead the company. And that was kind of the turning point. I remember very clearly October 7th, 1997. And I thought, wow, I was scared but not afraid. In fact, as a U.S. public company, I'd actually never been to Wall Street. So that was probably a good thing. I hadn't been tainted yet by the short-sightedness, but it actually all started. My aha moment was actually on an airplane. I was flying from Los Angeles to Sydney, and I was in the early stages of my CEO role, and I was actually reading some of the work of the Dalai Lama. And in this piece I read, he said, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If you can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And I went, well, that makes sense. And funnily enough, at just about the same moments later, I was reading something and I read this quote from Aristotle. Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And I thought, my goodness, what is this message I'm getting? If we can create an environment where people know they matter and they know they belong, would they be happier at work? Would they go home happy? And would they create better results? And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. I then started to think about how do I learn more about this? So I looked around and I ended up enrolling in a master's degree at the University of San Diego. And that's where I met my dear friend, my mentor, and eventually my co-author, Dr. Ken Blanchard, probably the guru of servant leadership and the 1-minute manager. And in that 2-year master's program, I learned the tools of servant leadership, and I started to apply them at WD-40 Company. And the rest is sort of history. We've built a wonderful culture, and it's not about me. The 3 most important words I ever learned in my life were "I don't know," and then getting happy with that was fine. But as you mentioned, Terry, we built a wonderful culture. And when I haven't retired, actually. I've refired. I don't like the word. But, WD-40 Company today is in 176 countries around the world. We have a last employee engagement survey, which was in March last year. We had employee engagement at 93%. 98% of the people say they love to tell people they work at the company. 96 or 7% say they actually respect their coach, who is their boss. We don't have managers. Words matter. They're called their coach. And it's all because we have a group of people that come together every day to protect and feed each other. Now, interestingly enough, Aristotle was right, because at the same time, over a 25-year period, we 6x the revenue, and the market cap grew from about 300 million to just near $3 billion. So not only did we have an organization that was sending people home happy, but we had an organization that delivered substantial financial rewards. And, finally, I just sum it up like this. Imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to a purpose that's meaningful and bigger than yourself, you learn something new, you're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. And why is that important? Happy people create happy families. Happy families create happy communities. Happy communities create a happy world. And by golly, we need a happy world. And business has the biggest opportunity ever to do that. So that's a little bit of the story.
Wow, I mean, that's so compelling, and it's amazing. You didn't even really talk about the product itself, right? And for somebody like myself, who, I do a lot of outside work as a hobby, right? I have a couple do tractor work, do all kinds of fixing things, and I wouldn't dream of going anywhere without a couple of cans of WD-40 tucked away, because if you got that and a roll of duct tape, you can buy time to do just about anything in that realm. And
absolutely,
and it's just that's so powerful. Now, I heard recently, I saw a little clip by Simon Sinek, who was calling you out in particular as a street whisperer, and I won't get his characterization of that exactly right, but it was something around the fact of some criticism that was going toward quarterly earnings, and you had a pretty powerful response. And I was wondering if you'd share that a little bit with our audience.
Yeah, sure. Simon is a good friend of mine. We met each other about 15 years ago, and I've learned a lot from Simon, so thank you to Simon. Yeah, I think what he was referring to was, this Wall Street, need to create quarterly earnings. And I think said, if this is the same instance, he said, he would have said that, one time I was on an earnings call with some analysts, and the analyst said, you missed your number this quarter. I said, it wasn't my number, it was yours. My numbers are fine. Thank you. And it really, it gets back to this, short-term thinking. Simon's whole, platform is playing the infinite game, not the finite game. Now, you have to have finite events within the infinite game. Yes. Don't get me wrong there. You have to have, clear strategy. There's 2 things you need in business. You need a very good strategy and a high will of the people. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies spend a lot of time on developing their strategy, but not enough time on developing the will of the people, or, a high engagement. You can write the best strategic plan in the world. We write a nice strategic plan. We take it to some smart professor at Harvard or wherever. He marks it up and says, congratulations, well done. You've got a great strategic plan. 70 out of 100 for your strategic plan. But if only 20% of your people go to work every day and are engaged and, working towards a purpose and learning and having values, 20 times 70 is 1,400. There's your output. But if 80% of your people, remember what, Aristotle said, if 80% of your people go to work every day and are engaged and working towards a purpose that's meaningful, and you're learning and being protected and set free by values, 80 times 70, well, 7 eighths of 56, 5,600. Duh. The math is simple.
Very simple.
It is so powerful. I'd love to hear. So talk a little bit more about that will of the people, right? Because for me, as a person who's been through, the recent thing that we've been through in healthcare, of course, is the pandemic, and what we've seen is a group of team members who are just in a really bad place, right? Like, they're questioning everything that they do. The engagement is at an all-time low. People have left the profession. That kind of tells me that the cultural aspects of what we're doing across the whole industry may be significantly compromised.
Well, again, thank you. It gets back to two things. Do I matter and do I belong? And, one of the biggest desires we have as human beings is to belong. That's why I developed the tribal leadership concept. We think about, tribes go back to the beginning of time, whether it was Ugg the caveman who was out hunting with his mates for for whatever they were going to eat. So belonging is so important. And, belonging is about, do I matter? And am I being, treated with care and candor? And am I being held accountable? And am I being responsible? And Terry, you remember this guy, right?
Yes, I remember that guy. I was just thinking about that guy. I was going to ask you about him.
I'm sorry you were thinking about him. It's not something I'd like you to be thinking about first thing Monday morning. But, this is Al. Al is the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Inc. And as you would think, Fear Inc. has a very, very low employee engagement. In fact, it may even be negative. And here are some of the behaviors that Al has that creates these toxic cultures. Al's ego eats his empathy instead of his empathy eating his ego. It's all about him. He thinks micromanagement is essential. He thinks he's corporate or it could be Alice too. Don't get me wrong,
Okay.
They think they're corporate royalty. They have worked their life to absolutely climb up this high ladder of respect in the company. They shall bow down to Al. They love a fear-based culture. They are a know-it-all, a master of control. They have all the answers, particularly the wrong ones. They think learning is for losers. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they don't follow through on their commitments. Now, I'm sure people listening, watching us today may have met Al or Alice. But it's Al or Alice's behavior that's creating these cultures where people don't feel like they belong. So if you want a culture where people feel like they belong, what really is important to have in that culture? Well, you have to have a people first mindset. It's all about the people. Remember what the Dalai Lama said, in that our purpose in life is to make people happy. Words matter. Let's take the word manager out of our vocabulary, and let's be coaches. Let's think of what a great coach does. A great coach never runs on the field. A great coach never goes to the podium to pick up the prize. A great coach doesn't try and score the goal. A great coach spends time on the sideline, observing the play with one objective. It's to help the player win or get an A. And, that was the basis of the book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, Helping People Win at Work. Don't mark my paper, help me get an A. So a coach's job is to help someone get an A. The other role of a coach is to spend a lot of time in the locker room. Why? Because the coach's job is to build trust within the locker room. They have to have clearly defined, authentic purposes within an organization, a hierarchical set of values that will protect people and set them free, transparency and a simple vision. And here's the big one. Let's take fear out of an organization by removing the word failure and replacing it with learning moments. This is huge. A learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. How many people do you hear running down corridors of organizations proudly yelling out, "I'm a failure"? None, because they've hidden that failure because they're afraid of Al, the soul-sucking CEO, who's of attacking them. So have learning moments. There needs to be belonging and acceptance and security, support, inclusion, and then the 4 pillars of care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. These are the things that we need to work on as leaders to create cultures where people know they matter and know they belong.
You know, Gary, I couldn't agree with you more in all that you said. And it's an easy read and it's easy to listen to. What's most important is for those organizations that are not there, and the majority of them are not there, we know that. How do they get there?
Well, the first thing is a realization that it's all about the people. And, put your ego aside. It's not about you, the leader. It's about in anything you do, if you need the support of people to be your best, what do you need to do? Support the people and have them in a position where they want to support you. So your role as a coach, as I said, it's not about you. You're there to help people win. And if you help people win, they'll help you win. That's why I'm so pleased I was born so stupid.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And you know what? There's probably more CEOs who probably wish that they were born stupid because they have made it all about them versus the organization. Just a little bit of how we met. We met, I guess, several years ago in Phoenix, Arizona, through our mutual friend and mentor, Marshall Goldsmith. And I've learned a great deal from him. And now, of course, Philip has had the opportunity to meet him. But tell us a little bit about Marshall's, I guess, impact on you and how you guys actually met.
Sure. So after graduating from the master's degree at USD, a few years later, I went back to USD and became a professor to teach in that program. And for 16 years, I've taught a class in the Master of Science in Executive Leadership around building corporate culture. And way back then, before I knew Marshall well at all, I got his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is one of the best reflections of Al ever. And I used that as the text in the class. And I knew Marshall lived in San Diego. So on a whim one day, I called him up and he answered his phone. I said, "Hey, Marshall, I'm Gary Ridge. At that time, I was CEO of WD-40 Company, but I'm also a professor, adjunct professor at USD. I'm teaching this class. I use your book as one of the texts in the class. Would you consider coming to my class and talking to my students?" And Marshall probably says now, unfortunately, said yes, so I never let him go after that. So for year after year, Marshall would graciously come on a Sunday morning, as Marshall is, he's just a giver, and he would help teach his principles in my class. So we just, over time became friends. And when he was putting together his, he had a dream where he said, he said he was going to retire. And as we know, he didn't. He's busier than ever right now. He said, "I want to get at that stage 15 people and teach them everything I know for free, as long as they commit to doing it as they get older, feeding it forward, paying it forward." So I was at a meeting up at Rancho Santa Fe one day, and Marshall saw the sign that we were there, and he comes bursting into the room, and as Marshall does, "Hey, Gary, hey, Marshall, how are you, blah, blah. Hey, you better sign up for my 15 coaches." I said, what are you talking about? And he told me the story, and I said, "Thanks, Marshall, but I've had the privilege of learning so much from you. I don't want to take a seat from someone else. I can get everything for free from you anytime I want." Marshall went off. So about 2 weeks later, I got a call from one of my co-professors, and they said, "Congratulations, do you see you're in the first 25? I said, "What are you talking about?" he said, you've just been named as one of the 25 in Marshall's group of that he's putting together. And I said, really? So I called Marshall up and I said, what's the deal? He said, I told you you're going to be in this, which has been fabulous,
Yes.
which has been fabulous. And, in fact, in a week or two, I'm flying off to Dubai, and Marshall and I are coaching together in Dubai. He's coaching the CEO of a company, and I'm coaching the COO. And I've met many, many great people through the group that you and I are in, Terry. People like Chester Elton, who wrote the book, The Carrot Principle in later times, Anxiety at Work, and Leading with Gratitude. Ron Carusi, who just wrote a great book, one of my favorites, to be honest, is the name of the book, and one of the best I've seen. And a bunch of other people that we form a circle and we just help each other out, as we're doing today. That's all we do. We're here to pay it forward and try and make the world a little better place by helping people build organizations where people actually love to go to work.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. What's interesting to me is the fact that you, as the CEO of WD-40, decided to actually teach an MBA course. I can't recall, not to say that it doesn't happen, hearing a CEO talk about teaching a course. What was the impetus behind you teaching the course, and what gifts did you receive from your students as you taught the course? What learnings were there for you?
Well, they say one of the greatest ways to learn is to teach. Yes. And certainly, over the 16 or so years that I've taught at USD, and the many, many leaders that have gone through that program, you learn something every day. And you get to test your theories and have people put it to work. But some of the greatest gifts I've got from that program is actually seeing people go and do it. And why did I do it? Because of the gift that Ken gave me, Ken Blanchard. His gift was to teach in that program, and I took what I learned from him and many of the other professors there at the time, and I decided to do something with it. And in doing something with it, we created a place at WD-40 Company where we were making a positive difference on people's lives. And, life is a gift. We don't want to send it back unwrapped. And a lot of people are not unwrapping life. And as I said, I think business has the biggest opportunity and responsibility ever today to make a positive difference on people's lives, because we touch more people every day than any other system does. And we need to do something about making the world a better place. This is not a good place right now. And, we need to do something about that. People are getting laid off, and, we're going through these terrible times. And we've just been through this big life lesson of COVID. And look at the way that changed the environment. So we've got to do all we can to help people and create these places, because again, it's life is a gift, and we better treasure it.
Yeah, you said something there that reminds me of another of Ken Blanchard's sort of philosophies that comes out in a different book, and I would consider Ken a paper mentor of mine for a long time. I love his books; they're easy to read, they are pragmatic, but Gung Ho, that he co-authored, And it talks about that the purpose of the company, in that case, the example he uses, really is about what it does for the sense of purpose of the people who are on the team that work there, and then collectively they deliver either a product or they deliver something, but there's this deep sense of meaning for those humans, for the humans that are their families and friends and neighbors, and for the communities that company exists in, that really is the more important purpose of the company than any other.
Absolutely.
And
we have a job to do, and we should be doing it.
Yeah, we see that, and I think it seems like, and again, another paper mentor, or these in this era, it's more video mentor, Simon Sinek. Although I've read all of his books, I think there's something in there that's very parallel to Ken's perspective there as well, in terms of he just has a different way of saying it. But,
absolutely.
So, And talk a little bit about what that would feel like as a team member, because you've obviously spent a lot of time in cultivating it.
Yeah. So I think how it should feel is around the four pillars of care, candor, accountability, and responsibility. So if you're a team member, a tribe member, your leader cares about you. And care is not only rewarding and applauding you for doing great work, but being brave enough to redirect you when you're not moving towards the A. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people protect their own comfort zone at the expense of someone else's development. It's, so they're not brave enough to do that. But great leaders both applaud, reward, and redirect. So care is number one. The second one is candor. And I kind of pinched, or I borrowed this from Simon: no lying, no faking, no hiding. I believe most people in organizations don't lie. I believe they fake and they hide. Why do they fake and hide? Well, because of Al, the soul-sucking CEO, who's, putting fear into the organization. They don't have learning moments. They have mistakes. So you've got to have that area of that. And again, having that coaching mentality around that is very important. Then there's accountability. And that was really the basis of what Ken and I wrote about in helping people win at work. I was in the class with Ken, and he was telling a story about when he was a professor and he used to give out the final paper at the beginning of the class. And the academics said, "What the hell are you doing, Blanchard, giving out the final paper?" He said, "Not only am I giving out the final paper, what am I going to do for the next 3 semesters? I'm going to help them learn the answers." And I went, "Oh, duh." In organizations, most people don't succeed because we haven't been clear about what we're going to hold each other accountable for. And so it's, what do you expect from me? What do I expect from you? Are we going to have the opportunity to have open and honest conversations about that? Are we going to do it regularly with one goal in mind, and that's to help you, the person that I have the privilege to coach and lead, get your A? And if you don't know what the A looks like when it walks in the room, there's no way you're going to get it. So accountability is very important. Then the final one is responsibility. And, we, again, as I said, words matter. And we developed a thing at the company many years ago, and we actually called it the Maniac Pledge. And what it is, it's a pledge of responsibility. And if I may, I'll read it to you.
Yes.
It says, "I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I am responsible for telling them." So a clear pledge of what we're going to hold each other responsible for. So they're the 4 pillars: care, candor, accountability, responsibility, and seeing them in action. It's not about the words. This whole thing is simple. It's not easy.
We hope you enjoyed that snippet from Dr. Tom Morris. If you want to see the whole episode, you can find it at unlikelyintersection.com, or you can find it on our YouTube channel, Unlikely Intersections. Now we're going to go to a snippet from Dr. Srikumar Rao. Terry, what should we expect?
We should expect to hear Dr. Rao at his best, describing for us how we need to take a look at our lives, the mental constructs that we live by, how we need to deconstruct what's not working for us and build new constructs or new mental models for us. Dr. Rao is a genius, and he serves as a mentor to both of us, so please enjoy this snippet of Dr. Srikumar Rao. One of the statements that I've heard you say that really resonated with me is, "Just bloom and the bees will find you." And you talk about the only work that we really have to do is work on ourselves. If you can elaborate on that for us, we'd greatly appreciate that.
Certainly. It goes back once again to the concept of a benevolent universe. And I believe that the only purpose in life is to work on yourself. And the benevolent universe gives you many tools, and these tools include your family, including your spouse and children, your work, the customers or clients that you have, the person who sits next to you on a plane trip that you're taking. They're all tools. You want to be as good a father as you can be. You want to be as good a partner as you can be. You want to do well by your clients. So you try your level best to do that. But in the process of doing that, what you're really doing is you're working on yourself. Everything but everything is a tool given to you, and use it as skillfully as you can. But in the process of doing that, what you're really doing is you're working on yourself. The only thing you ever do in life is you work on yourself. So if you have that understanding, then you do what you can, but you do not beat yourself up when the results are not what you would have liked them to be. At any given point, what you're doing is you're trying to do your best. You know, Lincoln was reputed to be a great orator, and when people say Lincoln was a great orator, they are generally talking about the Gettysburg Address, which is a fine speech. I have nothing to say against that. But I also like his second inaugural, where it says, with malice towards none, with charity for all, let us do the right as God gives us to see the right. Understand, he didn't say, I'm going to do the right. He said, I'm going to do the right as God gives us to see the right. We evolve, the situation changes, and when it changes, perhaps what you today saw as right is not as right tomorrow. In that case, you will do what is right at the time when you do what you need to do. So have that, if you will, as your guiding light. With malice towards none, with charity for all, we will do the right as God gives us to see the right. And recognize that everything but everything is a gift. If you're a person of faith, then be grateful to God. If you're atheistic or agnostic, the universe did it. They both work equally well.
Yeah, that's so powerful, so powerful. And another thing that I think you have explained to me in a different sort of way over time is the power of gratitude. And we gratitude has been real popular lately. Folks always talking about, just be grateful and it'll change your life. But for you, it's a little bit deeper, right? It's really becoming gratitude in a sense, if you will, rather than just being grateful for a bunch of stuff that you have. Can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Gratitude is now the new in thing. It's been discovered, quote unquote, in the last few years. And everybody talks, oh, you've got to be grateful. And many people advocate gratitude practices and exercise. What are three things that happened to you in the last day or the last week for which you're grateful? What are three things that you can look at and say, this is a miracle in you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of those are good. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. But I'm saying they only scratch the surface. And one of my students actually came up and challenged me. She said, Professor Rao, if people feel grateful because there are people starving in Bangladesh, or the people are homeless because of the war in Ukraine or the earthquake in Turkey, then you're actually, in some sense, using their misery to bolster your well-being. That doesn't sound a very nice thing to do. And there's more than an element of truth in what she is saying. Because anytime we are grateful for something, I'm grateful for good health. I can get hit by a truck tomorrow and become a quadriplegic. So what happens to my good health?
Right.
Anything that you are grateful for can be stripped from you. So I certainly advise people to be grateful for the many blessings in their life. But then I advise them to go further. Don't be grateful for anything. Just be grateful. That requires effort on your part. It requires an intellectual understanding of what I'm advocating and then effort to make that a part of your life. And it's a very good idea to begin as a first baby step to be grateful for the good things in your life. I will wager that all the people who are listening to this broadcast are incredibly privileged. None of them have to bother about whether I'm going to have dinner tomorrow. They have beds to sleep in. They have roofs over their head. Any of these is a big deal in a big chunk of the world outside. So when you point that out, you say, yes, I am privileged. But they don't feel privileged. They feel stressed out and put upon. They feel that they're living in a very cloistered, claustrophobic matrix. What's the reason for that? The reason for that is because of how they use what I call the flashlight of your awareness. Your awareness is exactly like a flashlight. What does a flashlight do? It illuminates whatever you shine it on. Shine it on the floor, it lights up the floor. Shine it on the floor, on the ceiling, it lights up the ceiling. And I'll prove it to you. I would like you, both of you gentlemen, right now, to take your flashlight of awareness and shine it on the chair in which you are sitting. And the moment I do that, you feel the pressure of your buttocks on the seat of the chair. You feel the fabric or the leather against the back of your thighs, right?
Yes.
30 seconds ago, you were not aware of any of this, but now you are. Why? Because you've shown the flashlight of your awareness on that. Typically, what do we do with our flashlight of awareness? We shine it on the 2, 3, or 4 things that are wrong in our lives. Or more precisely, on the 2, 3, or 4 things that we arbitrarily decide is wrong with our life. And the 50, 60, 200 things that are pretty darn good about our lives, we never shine the flashlight of our awareness on them. We take it for granted, and so they slip by unnoticed. Lousy strategy. So what I advise is, starting immediately, shine the flashlight of your awareness on the many ways in which you're truly blessed. I advocate certainly doing it last thing at night before you go to bed. When you get up in the morning, don't go immediately to the place of, oh my God, there's too much to do and I don't have enough time to do it all, which is a room that too many of us live in.
Mm-hmm.
Bring to mind the many ways in which you are incredibly fortunate. Wallow in it, marinate in it, soak yourself in it. And as you go through the day, periodically bring that up and revel in it, rest in it. And it's my hope that every one of you, everyone listening to this podcast, will live in a default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude. And the reason for that is simple. When you're in the default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude, you're not anxious, you're not nervous, you're not fearful, you're not worried. The two cannot coexist. And from that default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude, take whatever steps are appropriate to change the things in your life that you would want to be different. But when you reach out to make those changes from the domain of appreciation and gratitude, there is a power in your reaching out and your efforts that was not there before. And you'll be surprised at how easily you can deal with what you previously considered intractable or insurmountable problems.
You know, I'm in the CPM course for the second time now, and I'm also a part of the journey of awakening, right? Because I'm going to go deeper into the studies and deeper into myself. We talked about connotations before, the power of connotations and how we should strip them away. I've heard you talk about a construct called good, bad, who cares? And you told the story of a gentleman whose family had, some horses. If you can walk us through that, I think that's a great illustration for our listeners to hear.
Certainly. This is a very famous tale. it comes from the Sufi tradition. And it talks about a man and his son who lived in a beautiful valley, and they were very happy, but they were also very poor. And the man decided that he was going to become rich. He was sick and tired of being poor, and he wanted to be rich, and he decided he was going to become rich by breeding horses. So he bought a stallion. Did not have enough money to buy a stallion, so he borrowed heavily from the neighbors. And the very day he got a stallion, it kicked the top bar loose from the paddock where he housed it and ran away. And the neighbors came around and said, "You were going to become a rich man, but your stallion has run away. And you still owe us money. You are screwed." And the man shrugged his shoulder and he said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" That stallion fell in with a group of wild horses, and they were grazing close to where the man lived, and he was able to entice them into the paddock, which he had repaired, so escape was no longer possible. And all of a sudden, he had his stallion back, plus about a dozen wild horses. By the standards of that village, that made him a wealthy man. And the neighbors came around saying, "We thought you were destitute, but fortune has smiled upon you. How lucky you are." And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" The man and his son started to break the horses so they could sell them on the market. And one of the horses threw the man's son and stomped on his leg, and it broke, and it healed crooked. And the villagers came around commiserating. He was such a fine young lad, and now he'll never be able to find a girl to marry him. How terrible. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" That summer, the king of the country declared war on a neighboring country, and press gangs moved through the villages, rounding up all the able-bodied young men to serve in the army. But this man's son was spared because he had a crooked leg. And the neighbors came around with tears in their eyes and said, "We don't know if we'll ever see our sons alive again, but you still have your son. How fortunate you are." And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" And it goes on like that forever. Now think about your life, gentlemen. Can you recall any instance when something happened that at the time it happened, you thought this was terrible, this is terrible? But now, with the passage of time and greater wisdom, can you say, okay, that wasn't so bad at all? Or maybe even that was good? I'll give you an example. This just happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I had a person reach out to me for a speaking engagement, and it was a very lucrative speaking engagement. And I took note of that, and we said, okay, we can work something out. And then a speaking agent called me and said, "I have an opportunity. Would you be very interested?" And since I did not know the speaking agent, I thought I would refer him to somebody who I was working with who wants to represent me, and I want her to represent me, but she has to sell it internally to her bureau, and I thought I would turn it over to her. And some instinct told me, no, don't do it. So I rely on my intuition, and I did not do it. And it turned out that the person, the speaking bureau who contacted me, was actually referring to the same engagement that the client had contacted me for. If I had contacted the agent I wanted to work with, it would have unnecessarily complicated and perhaps compromised the relationship that was building. In this particular case, that did not happen, but it could so easily have happened. That is not the best possible example. Let me give you another one. I was speaking before the Global Executive Summit of the Entrepreneurs Organization, and when I narrated the good thing, bad thing story, somebody got up in the back and insisted on being recognized. So I did. And he said, Professor Rao, I have the exact perfect story for you. He was a very bright student. He graduated from the top engineering schools in India, got a master's from Stanford, got an offer with a high-tech firm, and he was looking forward to building his career. And his friends got offers from other high-tech firms. They were all going to build their careers together and, carry on their comradeship. But he had an immigration problem, as a result of which he had to leave the country. Tried to fight it by hiring a top lawyer, didn't work. So he had to leave, and he thought his career was over. Among other things, he had student debt. And when you have student debt in dollars and you're earning in rupees, you're not in a very good place.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, Professor Rao, as a result of my being forced to leave the country, I met and married this wonderful lady who's now my wife. I teamed up with a couple of my engineering school buddies, and we started a company, and it's going gangbusters. All my clients are in America. I come to America at least 6 times a year, and I have a picture-perfect life. And none of this would have happened if I had not been forced out of the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're about to label something bad, understand that when an event occurs, it does not cause suffering. Any event. You get fired, you now have a lot of spare time. You get fired and you go, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay my mortgage? My kid's college tuition is due. This is terrible. And the moment you label it, this is terrible, at that instant, suffering begins. Suffering doesn't begin when you lose your job. Suffering begins the instant you label it terrible, bad.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? Are you with me on that?
Yes.
So if you ask yourself that question, is there any possible way in which this thing could possibly turn out to be good? Just ask yourself that question before you label it bad. Just asking yourself that question will move you to a different emotional domain. And then if you ask yourself the next question, what can I proactively do to make it good? And you move seamlessly from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. This is how you become not resilient, but extremely resilient. Nothing ever gets you down because you never label anything that happens to you as this is bad, this is terrible. You simply label it, this happened. And then, of course, there's the logical question, what do I do now? So if you practice this, then no matter what happens in your life, instead of labeling it a tragedy, you label it this happened, and then you ask yourself, what can I do? Is there any possible way that in a few years I'll look back upon this and say, what a wonderful event?
Yeah, you touched on something that set my mental chatter off a minute ago, and it's the second arrow phenomenon that you explained so eloquently. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that second arrow for our listeners. We all shoot ourselves a lot.
Oh, yes. As I mentioned before, I am an executive coach. I coach persons who have a strong spiritual drive and who also want to make a outsized impact on the universe. And if I could get them to stop at the second arrow, they'd be way ahead of the game. Frequently, they're on their fifth, sixth, or 298 arrows before they realize what they're doing. This was a teaching of the Buddha, and it's one of the more powerful teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha asked Ananda, his disciple, Ananda, if an arrow would have hit you in the arm, would it not be very painful? And Ananda nodded and said, yes, Lord, it would be very painful. And if a second arrow would have hit you exactly where the first arrow hit, would it not be even more painful? And Ananda nodded and said, yes, Lord, it would be even more painful. And then the Buddha asked a surprising question, why then do you shoot the second arrow? Now, that needs some explanation, so let me tell you a story. This is a story that I have taken from a TED Talk that I listened to. There was a woman, an attractive woman, very successful, and she had a very messy divorce. And it broke her up. It took her a very long time to recover. But in bits and pieces, she put her life together and felt that she was ready to go out again. So she went to the internet sites and filled in a profile and all the usual things. And she met this entrepreneur, handsome, funny, and most of all, he really seemed into her. So after a few weeks of talking on the phone and texting and the rest of it, they decided to meet. And she was all excited and she bought a new dress and they met in an upscale Manhattan cafe. And 15 minutes into that meeting, he gets up, he throws his napkin on the table, and he says, "I'm not interested." And he walks out. And the woman was crushed. She was so dejected that the only thing she could do was call her friend. And her friend said, "Well, why are you surprised? You have fat hips. You have nothing interesting to say. Why would a handsome, intelligent, successful man pay any attention to you?" Are you shocked that a friend would say something like that at this juncture? Probably. Would you be less shocked if I told you that it wasn't a friend, it's what she told herself? Probably. That is the second arrow. It's bad enough being rejected, but telling yourself that you're physically unattractive and socially inadroit, does that make things any better? Obviously not, but we do it all the time. The interesting thing about the second arrow is that it is always delivered by mental chatter. Let me repeat that. The second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. That's how important that concept is. And as I said, with my coaching clients, if they stopped the second arrow, they'd be way ahead of the game. Very frequently, they're on their 50th, 60th, or 600th arrows before they realize what they're doing to themselves. Here is a challenge I throw to you and everyone listening to this podcast. No matter what situation is of concern to you right now, no matter what situation is of concern to you right now, your mental chatter about that situation is making it at least an order of magnitude worse, perhaps several orders of magnitude worse. And that's one of the things I do with my coaching clients, and in the course that both of you are in, is we show you how to recognize the second arrow and stop shooting them. God knows life is going to give you enough wounds without your adding to their number and intensity.
That's pretty deep. I mean, that's one thing I think as we get ready to wind up the hour, and it's gone fast. Wow, really appreciate the powerful messages shared with our audience. But that whole concept of we're continually injuring ourselves with that second arrow that's born in that mental chatter, which is going on all the time, way more than we can ever recognize. Just working on that. And I wanted, as we kind of close out, one of the things that I've noticed in your program that you're pretty insistent on, don't just notice it, write it down. And I was wondering if you could just share with us the power of writing it down versus thinking you can just keep up with it.
When I ask you to note things, when I ask you, for example, to note the signs that the universe is friendly, when I ask you to note down stuff that happened in your life that you thought was terrible, but you can now see that it was not so after all, you forget. You forget how many such instances there have been. You don't even remember what you had for breakfast 3 days ago. What makes you think you're going to remember this? You're not. Write it down. But when you write it down and in your own handwriting, you see how many instances there are that it was a friendly universe, the cumulative impact of that makes makes itself felt. That's why both of you are doing the alternate reality, and part of the instructions you were given is note down all the signs you have that the reality is working. Mm-hmm. It's super important you do that, because otherwise you'll simply forget.
It is amazing. I know I'm getting ready to start my second notebook already. We're like 2 weeks into the class, so that is very powerful. Dr. Rao, it's been just a wonderful hour, and thank you so much for joining us and sharing so much wisdom with our listeners. We hope you enjoyed that short segment with Dr. Srikumar Rao. If you want to see the whole segment, you can find it at unlikelyintersection.com or on our YouTube channel at Unlikely Intersections. Again, we appreciate you joining us at the intersection, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.